conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, Parliament breaks up on Thursday, goes into recess for the summer, not back until September. The government have engineered that 5 days earlier than it was due to be, and I guess it's all an attempt to end the agony, because it is every single day a gruelling battle in Parliament. A government trying to get its Chequers deal through, trying to get us to leave the European Union on March the 29th next year, albeit not the kind of Brexit that I think we voted for. And tonight, a very important moment, I think, in all of this. About 20 minutes ago, there was a very, very key amendment on the trade bill where Tory rebels had tried to change the legislation. The idea was that if by the end of January 2019 a trade deal had not been agreed, this amendment said that we would automatically go and sign up for a customs union. And that would have been completely against Theresa May's manifesto, although, oddly, she wants us to be in a customs union on trade anyway. This would have been more all-encompassing. Let's listen to the news of that vote.
The ayes to the right, 301. The noes to the left, 307.
So a bit of relief there. I'm sure Theresa May hugely delighted they'd managed to win this, because a lot of the pundits all through the day thought they would lose. As I say, it's a funny one, because in a sense, the Chequers deal wants us to sign up to a customs union on trade, but it doesn't want to be forced by the Commons to keep us in the customs union as it currently is. Nonetheless, you know, maybe one has to say that Theresa May has achieved a bit of a victory tonight. And I'm going to ask you, do you think, despite everything, and even if it is Brexit in name only, do you think, despite everything, Theresa May actually is going to deliver Brexit? And maybe you're one of those people who says, you know what? She's got great resolve. She's survived as Prime Minister through some very, very tough times. And yep, I think she's going to get us over the line for what will be, even if the terms are rubbish, it still will be an historic break at 11 p.m. on March the 29th next year. And if that's how you feel, if you think we're on course with the Prime Minister, call 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you feel, actually, do you know what? Even if she succeeds, what kind of Brexit is it that we're going to get post the Chequers deal? In that case, text to 84850. Or maybe you think, no, actually, they may have won this one, but there's a long way to go with all of this. Major crises probably to come in September, October, November, December. And really, you know, maybe the whole thing actually is going to break down and we're going to finish up with another general election, or even horror of horrors, a second referendum. And if that's how you feel, please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch me live on Facebook. I'm here in a very muggy Washington, D.C. So is she going to get us over the line? Kai is calling from Petersfield, a new caller to this show. Good evening, Kai.
Hello, nice to talk to you, Nigel. Hello.
Good to talk to you. So are we on track?
You know, people are so easy and ready to knock poor old Theresa. I've been willing to give her the benefit of the doubt for ages, because I think she's just facing such an undemocratic situation in Parliament, as well as the EU, as you well know, because you were always part of it. And you pointed out their very undemocratic ways. It's 50-50. I think she genuinely, I still have to give her the benefit of the doubt, genuinely is trying to achieve a result. Because I've spoken to quite a lot of Remainers, and there are a lot of Remainers who actually can't stand the process, because a vote is a vote. And we voted one way, and that was it. And I know those particular people accept the vote, which Parliament is not doing. It's obvious to anybody with a brain. You know, so I was going to say to you tonight, if she'd lost the vote, I was going to phone you up and say, when can we start the revolution? You know.
Yeah, well, I think there are a few people feeling like that out there. And, you know, I have to say, Kai, I don't know what the sort of mood is in Petersfield when you talk to people, but in general, I think politicians widely are being held in more contempt than they ever have been.
Which is sad, but it's true. I mean, I say quite a few heartless things. Same again with somebody like Trump. I think there's so much going on behind the scenes that we are not aware of. Again, they're not giving they haven't given him a break from the word go. Just as same with Theresa. It's almost like it's a mirror image. They haven't given her a break since the word go. And if people could just shut up, put up and shut up, just they've put up. Now they should shut up now and let her get on with the job, because to weaken her negotiating position, which is what they're trying to do, that much is obvious, is not in the national interest, which they keep bleating on about. It's in the national interest. We should have a second referendum. That is not in the national interest. We've had that part, Kai,
the problem I've got is, she stands up and says, we're taking back control of our laws, our borders, we're getting out of the common fisheries policy. I've often said before, it's like she's been wound up at the back and sent off to say these things. And then, when you see government papers on this, you realise that actually none of this would be achievable for many, many, many years. So, I will give her the benefit of the doubt on one thing.
You've got the heads up on that.
Yeah.
We haven't, as an ordinary member of the public, I haven't seen that, but I'll take your word for it.
Take fisheries, Kai. Take fisheries, Kai. We're leaving the common fisheries policy. Hooray! And then, inside the government paper on fisheries, it says we'll be able to negotiate a better, stronger deal. Well, but either we're leaving and taking back our territorial waters, or we're not. But on the key issue, and I guess the single most important thing is leaving the Treaty of Rome that we signed up to and we joined all the way back on the 1st of January 1973, getting over that line on March the 29th. You think she'll get us there, Kai, do you?
I hope so. I mean, I
hope so
for this country. I hope so for this country, because there are so many disillusioned people out there who will be even more disillusioned with this process. I personally hope so, because I want to leave this undemocratic situation, which the EU has become and is going to become worse.
Getting worse.
It's
getting worse. It's getting worse. I mean, the way they talk to the governments of Poland, of Hungary, I mean, quite extraordinary. Kai, thank you very much indeed for your call. I get on Twitter, Remainer Tory MPs only voted out of fear of the government collapsing. Well, Leo, I think that's right. I think the one reason that she's still the leader and she got through this vote tonight is they're terrified of a general election. They're terrified that with Theresa May at the helm, who just doesn't quite cut the mustard with the broader public, that there would be a Corbyn government. Teflon Theresa strikes again, says Christopher. Happy days, Nigel. No deal. Here we come. Bill, I'd love to believe that, but I don't believe. I do not believe that this cabinet and this parliament would allow us to leave with no formal deal with the European Union. Can we stop calling it Brexit in name only and call it what it really is? Remain in all but name. Okay. I'll think about that. Maybe I'll change the script. Jason in Sutton, is Theresa May going to get us over the line?
Hi, Nigel. No, because she's totally incompetent. She's not going to be there by October. And what the Parliament have done tonight, which is actually quite genius, is they've made a second referendum almost inevitable now. Now, let me explain why. And the Chequers deal was dead on departure, right? So the Chequers deal is just not possible, because they're asking the EU to do things that are illegal, that would force them to renegotiate the deal with Canada, the deal with Japan and everything else. So they're not going to bend the rules for the UK, because it's too big a problem for the EU to do that. Now, the UK government made it illegal for us to be able to fall back onto WTA rules. If we Brexit with no deal, then we cannot negotiate any new free trade agreements with any of the 164 member countries of the World Trade Organization. Now, this is actually quite serious.
Hang on. The World Trade Organization, Jason, is set up to encourage free trade around the world. They'd be very happy for us to be a full member of it.
Well, I speak from the position of having lived in 12 different countries, spent a decade as an international trade negotiator. I've negotiated billions of dollars worth of deals. The Hong Kong government flew me out to represent them as an expert witness in an international arbitration case. So I'm speaking from a little bit of experience. One of the WTA rules, the terms that they insist on, that all the 164 members have agreed to, is that you have to be able to measure, control and check the volume and value of goods coming into and out of your country. Now, in order for us to be able to do that in the UK, we have to have border controls and checks and controls between Northern and Southern Ireland if we come out of the EU with no deal. The fact that the House of Commons just said we're not going to be any part of the customs union means that we have to have some kind of controls between North and Southern Ireland. However, the EU Withdrawal Act that's just received royal assent a couple of weeks ago is now an act of law in the United Kingdom. If you look at Section 10.2b, it specifically, categorically makes it illegal for the United Kingdom to implement any kind of controls, checks, or technology on that border between Northern and Southern Ireland that did not exist before the referendum. So we can't put anything in there. We can't create a border. Therefore, we cannot trade under WTO.
But we have a border now. You know, there's a lot of myth about this. There is a border there now. You know, and already, of course. Yeah, of course there's a border. There is a legal border, and there's a different currency on one side of the river to the other, and there's a, you know, different VAT regime. I mean, the real argument here was about not having a hard border, wasn't it? It was the image of, you know, the army, watchtowers, and all the rest of it. If we are in a different regime outside the European Union, it doesn't need to be a hard structure, does it?
No, but what we've just legislated, this act of law in the UK by our sovereign parliament has just specifically legislated you cannot put any checks, controls, or technology that did not exist on that border before the referendum.
Well, now, at the moment, we changed then, won't it? It'll have to be changed then, won't it? But I mean, it'll have to be changed.
Then you're creating the issue that breaches the Good Friday Agreement, which is also illegal.
No, the Good Friday Agreement...
Not EU law.
The Good Friday Agreement... The Good Friday Agreement... The Good Friday Agreement was 20 years ago. The world has changed. And you know something? I've not met anybody in the north or south of Ireland that wants to return to the bad old days. You know, I see that bridge in Detroit, Jason, where, you know, agricultural goods go back and forth. No lorries are ever stopped. No lorries are ever checked. Everything's pre-registered online. There are ways round that. There are ways round that problem if we want there to be. That's my view. Jason, I thank you for your point. However, Jason's main point is that he started off with she'll be gone by October anyway. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC, and it's now 7:16. The government squeaks through. There were many that thought they'd lose today, but no, they are. I mean, after all, the EU withdrawal bill got the royal assent a couple of weeks ago. They are beginning to get us towards leaving on March the 29th, but... boy, there's a long, long way to go. But do you think, after this little victory tonight for the Prime Minister, do you think maybe, just maybe with her, we are actually going to get Brexit, even if it's unrecognisable for what many want? Aidan is calling from Bushy and is a new caller to this show. Aidan, good evening.
Nigel. Nigel, I just want to say I'm relieved to a degree that the government won tonight. It's kicking it down the road a little bit. Theresa May, to me, no disrespect to her personally, is a coward. She won't go on TV and debate. She didn't debate at the general election. She's not a leader. If you're going to run a company or run a department or run a country, you have to be able to take people with you. And inside her, she is not a Brexiteer. The general public were misled in 1975. They had a vote to leave the common market. 6 million people voted to leave the common market. Okay? 33%. 67% voted to remain. But to remain in what? The common market? No, they were lied to. And the general public, the older generation, are getting their own back on the lying politicians who, all the time in the 70s, had every intention of tying us into the political institution.
Yeah, and they've underplayed it, actually, Aidan. Actually, Aidan, you know, over 40 and more years, they've always, our political class, underplayed the importance of the European Union, underplayed the extent to which they were making UK legislation all the way through.
Ever closer union, it was not debated.
Aidan, I mean, I was saying last night that, you know, my view is, all the while she stays as Prime Minister, we have no chance of getting the Brexit that we want, but we may get Brexit. We may leave that treaty in March next year.
But bear in mind...
Isn't it more likely that, you know, the odd little victory here and there, fine, but isn't it actually more likely that actually she is going to get brought down as leader, and that maybe, just maybe, if the Tory party found a leaver, a committed leaver with passion, and held a general election, they'd win a majority, and then we really would get Brexit?
Well, that's what I want, but I don't know whether anyone's got any backbone. The fact that domestic GDP and overseas rest of the world accounts for 85% of our trade, there wouldn't be a cliff edge. It's all a lie. There may be a slight step down, but we would recover.
I'm just going to correct you there, Aidan. I can correct you there. I mean, basically, our trade with the European Union is about 40%. So, you can't underplay that, but 85% of the world economy is outside the Eurozone. So there is great global potential. But our politicians don't really respect our vote, Aidan, do they?
Not going to be affected.
They're not going to be affected.
No, our domestic economy will not be affected. And if you add the rest of the world trade in, the European Union is less than 15% of our overall GDP. So, that's not going to be affected.
Of GDP, it's about 12%, isn't it? Yeah. No.
Exactly.
I agree with that.
88%. Okay, I said 85. Call me a liar for 3.
No, sure.
88% of our trade will continue. And given the opportunities, we can go elsewhere. However, if we tie ourselves to a rule book, and I'm not an expert on it, but if we tie ourselves, then we will stop ourselves growing. And I don't know whether Boris or Michael Gove, I don't know, but someone has to stand up and lead. They have to lead. And unless you have a leader, all we'll do is follow, Nigel.
I agree with that, Aidan. I agree with that analysis completely. Thank you. Nigel, can't believe they're going on a summer break when the country is in such a mess. Politicians are covering their own backs, not bothered about the country. It's disgusting, says Denise, who'd keep them there all summer. Nigel, why are Jacob Rees-Mogg and David Davis called Brexit rebels? Surely all they're trying to ensure is that Leavers actually get what they voted for. Well, it's more than that, David. It isn't just what they voted for in the referendum, it's what they also voted for in the general election in June of 2017. You're quite right, and it just shows you how the establishment have reframed the debate. There was no talk of hard Brexit and soft Brexit in the referendum whatsoever. They're new terms that were dreamt up by the Remainers after the referendum. Hard Brexit means we leave the single market and customs union. Soft Brexit means we stay. The way Brexit is going, I think we will cross the finishing line, but she'll be grinding her teeth all the way there. Chris, we may, but it will not be a clean democratic Brexit. That is my view. Tell me I'm wrong on 03456060973. Just remember, says Phil, not everyone who voted Leave voted for a hard Brexit. Phil, they'd never heard of a hard Brexit. What they did, they voted for us to be independent. Others of you think we're heading towards a no deal. Gillian says the EU will not accept the deal, so we will have a no deal. Gillian, if I thought that was going to happen, great. But I feel if we get to no deal, this cabinet and this parliament would, in those circumstances, try and force us to vote again. James is calling from Barnes. Good evening, James.
Good evening, Nigel. Nigel, as much as I don't agree with anything you say, I think you're a very thoroughly decent chap. But I was going to ask you one question. Do you think that the Tory Remainers, who did not go with their convictions, and this is democracy after all, and let's face it, they think that remaining is best for the country. That's what they actually think in their heart.
They do.
And their heads. And so therefore, but they didn't vote that way, which is what in their hearts and minds is the best for the country. They voted the way that they were told to vote. Is that not really a dereliction of their duty? In my opinion. And
James, let's just examine that, because that's really interesting, isn't it? Who does an MP have their biggest priorities for? Is it for themselves and their career? Is it for their conscience? Is it for their constituents? And it's not something, James, that we discuss often enough. Clearly, we have in normal circumstances a representative democracy where we entrust somebody to represent us from an area and to vote on things as they see fit. The difference here, James, is that this decision about Brexit was subcontracted out to the people in the form of a referendum. And I would argue that in a democracy, they should follow the will of the people.
But as you know, Nigel, and you've said it many times, you've been very frank about it, and it doesn't, the referendum, and you can say, well, I'm clutching at straws, was a consultative referendum. It did not say that whatever is the result, that will be what the government will go.
Well, in legal terms, In legal terms, James, in legal terms and constitutional terms, of course, you're right. However, what David Cameron, who promised and then called that referendum, told us is that it would be binding. And people understood when they voted that it would be binding.
I just find, I take exactly everything you're saying. I just find there's a very fine line between what is democracy working and what is democracy not working. And you've got the bizarre situation with William Rees-Mogg and Lord Manderson agreeing with each other that this is a rotten deal. And I actually believe that the EU will throw this out. I don't believe they'll accept anything but a hard Brexit, which is what it should be, one way or the other. That's what even Manderson said. Better to have a hard Brexit than this nonsense.
I think this is right. I mean, even if Mrs May gets us over the line on March the 29th, and maybe she will, we're actually going to finish up in a kind of Brexit Britain that is almost worse than it was before. Still wrapped in.
You would want, Nigel, seriously?
No, God, no, of course not. I mean, I think it's absolutely awful.
That we remain, and then you try again to have a referendum where it is quite clear that this is what it is, set in stone, and that's it. Wouldn't that... I
think there is... I still think there is a chance. There is still a chance, and I've said it consistently. I think this Prime Minister needs to be brought down by somebody in our own party who's got the courage to say, we are going to go for a clean, democratic Brexit, you call it hard Brexit. And if there was no way of any agreement at all with the European Union, with that charming Monsieur Barnier and his friend Verhofstadt, then I think that leader could put this to a general election in this country and win a big majority. That, I think, is the way we break the deadlock. But hey, James, you raised some very important points, worthy of real debate on a much longer programme than we've got tonight. I'm learning more to supporting her, more and more. I'm starting to believe she will eventually get us over the line. Let's see. John from Abbeywood, she may well get us over the line, but she's getting us over the line, taking us to a place that nobody really wants to be, I'm afraid. Ian says, would love to know what a Cameron happiness survey would look like if polled now. Remember that, Tosh? I do. Well, Mr. Cameron himself, I don't think, is very happy. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive on LBC. It's now 7:30 and... Well, a surprise win for the government tonight. They're not going to be forced to join a customs union if there is no deal agreed at the end of January. So no deal, in theory, is still on the table. We will see whether Parliament would ever actually accept that, let alone whether the Cabinet would ever accept that. And this victory for the government achieved chiefly because, in my view, there were Tories scared about bringing down the government, about having a general election, but also, very well worth remembering, there were five people elected as Labour MPs that supported the government. Kate Hoey, Frank Field, Graham Stringer, John Mann and Kelvin Hopkins. So those five elected as Labour MPs made the real difference. And while we're on Brexit, announcement today, fines and a possible police probe for Vote Leave, the official Leave campaign during the referendum. And they have been fined tens of thousands of pounds, and senior figures have been referred to the police for breaking electoral law. What's it all about? Well, this is the campaign that Boris Johnson and Michael Gove were involved with, and they failed to declare some of the money they spent. They've been fined £61,000. This is all because they gave some excess money, a donation. So 7 million was the limit that they could spend. They had an extra £680,000 over. They gave it to an organisation called Believe, who spent the money with a firm called Aggregate IQ, and it's deemed that that was done effectively with collusion, that they were working, that this money wasn't separate to them, they were in control of it. And that, of course, has led to claims that, oh, maybe the whole thing should be rerun. But hey, you know, the 7 million on top of the official 7 million that was spent by groups supporting the Remain campaign, and some quite considerable evidence that they had conference calls every morning and that they were colluding and not separate independent campaigns. I wonder, will the Electoral Commission investigate the Remain campaign? Well, don't hold your breath, because that's not how the establishment works. Back to Mrs May. A victory for her. Is she, despite everything, going to get us over the line on March the 29th next year? Helen from Birmingham is a new caller to the show. Welcome, Helen.
Hello, Nigel.
So, is she going to do it?
I think she will, yeah, but it won't be the Brexit we voted for, like you said yourself, and that's very, very disappointing. I think it will be because her party are too scared of a general election, like you say, which is very disappointing for the general public that voted to leave the European Union, because we're not ultimately going to get, under this Prime Minister, what we voted for. So it's very frustrating, really, from that point of view.
And what's your view, Helen, of politicians after all this?
Well, I was one of those people who voted Conservative because I trusted and believed in what Theresa May was saying in this Brexit means Brexit. So my opinion generally of politicians has gone down quite significantly since then. I'm not saying I don't trust any of them, but generally, as a whole, my opinion's gone down an awful lot since then. So
what needs to happen, Helen? What needs to happen? Am I perhaps right when I say we need a new strong leader of the Tory party who actually believes in Brexit?
Yeah. You're definitely right, yeah.
And would that restore a bit of your faith in the whole democratic process?
What would restore my faith is if we had somebody who had the intention of delivering what we voted for, like you say, a strong person there who wants to deliver, and she just doesn't. She can have these little victories like she's had today, but ultimately it's only going to be a half in, half out Brexit at best, isn't it?
It's not really a victory, Helen. It's the avoidance of defeat. She's stumbling from one crisis to the next. Helen, I hope things improve. I hope we get some proper leadership. But right now, I think the way you're feeling, well, I think a lot of people like you are feeling a bit disenchanted. A lot of other people are feeling quite angry. Overall, nobody is very happy. Thank you for calling in. Martin on Facebook says, Mrs May should have filled her government with Brexiteers. It's all her fault. Well, of course she should have done. But the trouble is, Martin, that she wasn't a Brexiteer herself, and I don't really think that she is. Jacob Rees-Mogg saying the other day that she has remained a Remainer, and I think Jacob actually is right about that. The fact that the PM is stumbling on from one crisis to another suggests she's not being well served by civil servants. They are either incompetent or actively ensuring that she's being stitched up, says Gary in Horsham. Well, you may well be right, but isn't it funny that Dominic Raab has come in, the Surrey MP has come in to replace David Davis as the Brexit Secretary, and we hear this week that 50 staff from that department are being cut, as the official Brexit department are not the ones in charge. It is Ollie Robbins and the civil service. And that is, and this is why you're right, Gary, to raise this point, Theresa May is in hock to the civil service. It's our civil service negotiating with the civil service in Brussels. No wonder we're not getting where we need to be. Charlotte in the Forest of Dean, is Mrs May going to deliver Brexit?
Well, I don't think I think she's going to just twist and turn, Nigel, and try not to give us the Brexit that many of us want. I mean, if it's right that she showed that white paper to Angela Merkel, I'm surprised that she won't stick with the plan and just try and wiggle around and just do us out of the Brexit that we actually want, the hard Brexit.
Why, Charlotte, is she doing this, do you think?
Well, she's a Remainer. She wants to stay in the EU. She obviously has nothing but contempt for the people who voted for Brexit, and she doesn't really care much about her party either, in order to keep the whole thing running along together. There are no concessions here, as far as I can see from her. She's just sitting there with all her Remainers around her now, because she's got very few Brexiteers left in the cabinet, and I just think that she's literally going to try and force her hand. But I think circumstances, the political circumstances, may just change some of the Brexit ideas that she's got, and then there may be some that's tipped in our favour, perhaps.
I mean, some, Charlotte, would say that she's very resolute, she's very brave, she's in a very tough situation, and she's done incredibly well to hang on as long as she has.
Personally, I think there were no options, and I don't think they wanted another leadership race. Why should they? Because basically, all of our main parties, apart from a few who are diehard Eurosceptics, want to stay in the EU. So why would they want to run another leadership election with the
how are we going to get
idea that a Brexiteer would actually get in like Marg or David Davis or Boris or somebody like that?
So how are we going to get, Charlotte, what you want? How are we going to get the Brexit that you want, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's not just me, is it? It's 17.4 plus million voters that want a hard Brexit. We want out of the EU. And I have a feeling that it's going to be the people that are going to have to fight for it. I think Steve Bannon on your show said on Sunday that, these things do not come easy. And in the end, it's up to the people to fight for it. And it depends what gumption we have to actually fight our own politicians to try and get what we want. I mean, at the moment, I think, the odds are stacked against us, but then I would never stack anything against the will of the British people when they're out.
No, nor would I. Nor would I, Charlotte. And there could be dramas to come, just as the Brexit referendum, was a huge, huge piece of political theatre. Maybe something even bigger than that will come in the future if people like you are denied what they want. Charlotte, I thank you. I'm going to go to Paul in Manchester, a new caller to this show. Paul, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you very much for having me on your show tonight.
Welcome. So, is she going to succeed?
Is Theresa May going to succeed in thwarting Brexit? I doubt it very much. I think 17.4 million people, and counting, even if you believe the official figures, won't let her do that. I think you're being very generous to her, Nigel, quite honestly. She is a Remainer in her heart of hearts.
Paul, I have... come on. I mean, I do try to discuss both sides of an argument with the callers, but I have not been generous to her. I've said, Paul, consistently over the last few months, she's the worst Prime Minister I've seen in my lifetime. I think she's been willfully deceitful by promising people a clean Brexit and then managing that it's not. So, Paul, I've not been nice about her, but I do, on a human level, you have to say she's pretty resolute, isn't she?
One of your qualities that you always sound nice, which is so wonderful. Anyway, Nigel, let me just talk about this. Let's assume we get a version of Brexit, no matter what it is, even if it's hard, soft, or a bit floppy in the middle. Let's get something on the table. Let's get it out there so that we can link up with Viktor Orban, with the Austrians, with the Italians, and get a pan-European network of nation-states going to put sovereignty above everything, we hear about trade this, customs union that, but really we're talking about the British desire to take back control after hundreds of years of this being in the making. It's not just since the Treaty of Rome 57. It's way back that the elite have been trying to get hold of their hands at us, the British people. They're not going to do it. If we link in with the British, we need some sort of form of European nation federation, don't we? Confederation of loose nation states.
Yes.
And these Verhofstadt characters, they're not going to do it. We need a root and branch reform of all of it. How are we going to do that? We need some British constitutional reform. We need some form of written constitution so that we're not umming and ahhing over what this Brexit is. It's in sacrosanct. It said the government will implement the decision. It set it in the 9 million quid they spent of taxpayers' money.
I know. And Paul, I'm a convert to a written constitution because I do not want our political class ever to give away our freedoms again. And I take your point about linking hands with other countries around Europe. It's fascinating. Here we are struggling with Brexit. The rest of the continent is in Eurosceptic uproar. Paul, I thank you for your call and your points. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:45. Surprise win for the government tonight. She does it with the support of 5 Labour rebels. Otherwise, she wouldn't have won. And a no deal is still a possibility in theory. In practice, I'm not so sure with this cabinet and this parliament that it is. But maybe, just maybe for once, we can give her some credit and say maybe with Mrs May we will actually leave the treaty on March the 29th, even if it's unrecognisable as Brexit. Richard's very clear with me. He says May needs to go. We haven't even sat opposite Barnier lately. The route map May has put forward is not a deal. Others disagree. May has to stay. Agree, we need a strong leader, but if there was a general election now, Corbyn would win. In the words of Dad's Army, if this was to happen, we're all doomed. Well, I suspect that if there was a general election right now between Mrs May and Jeremy Corbyn, I do not think for one moment actually Jeremy Corbyn would get a majority, but it might be very close. It may in fact be another hung parliament. My view is that if you had a Tory leader who really believed in Brexit, they would win a clear majority, because there are a lot of people out there that would vote for it. Robert is calling from Oldham. Good evening, Robert.
Good evening, Nigel. I will be quite clear. May has to go. She has to quit.
Okay.
I'm a Conservative grassroots member here in Oldham, and I have a Facebook campaign page that I run, and I wrote to Theresa May last week saying that she has let down Britain, she's let down the Conservative grassroots, and she's let down 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit. Yesterday, I had a letter that I sent to the Daily Express published calling for exactly the same thing. The way I look at it and the people I speak to, there is no hard Brexit, there's no soft Brexit, there's no in-the-middle Brexit. It's Brexit, and that means we have a clean break. The customs union vote is welcome tonight, but I don't believe that we're getting the Brexit that we voted for. What we've got is an Ollie Robbins, Gavin Barwell Brexit, and with the 50 civil servants cut from the department, it's Robbins that's running the department, and I think it's about time that May turned around and said to Ollie Robbins, you do what the people say, if you don't, I'm going to sack you.
But the problem is, Robert, presumably there are too few members of Parliament that feel the will to make this move. I mean, the story we've heard is there are something like 38 to 40 letters that have been lodged with the 1922 committee calling for this confidence vote. Why are so many of your MPs, Robert, in your party prepared to stick with her?
Because I think they're afraid, Nigel, that if
so
they
don't. So do I.
Election, I don't think that. I'll be quite blunt, Nigel. I'm a Yorkshireman. They've got no backbone. They've got no spine. And they need to find a leader that believes in Brexit. She says she believes in Brexit. She isn't. She's a Remainer. She came out for Remain in 2016. She can't. The Chequers plan was a disaster. And then you have the White Paper, which isn't delivering the Brexit we want. We need someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, who do believe in Brexit. The problem with Rees-Mogg is, would he be popular with the country? We need a Brexiteer. We haven't got one, and I think the Cabinet are too weak.
Robert, I don't disagree with any of that. You know, and if you listen to this show, I've been calling for a different leader, somebody that believes in Brexit, somebody with a bit of inspiration, somebody who's a bit tough. But, Robert, do you actually think it will happen?
No, because I think she's the worst Conservative leader. I'm 53. And she is the worst Conservative leader in living memory, and that includes Edward Heath, who was a disaster in my opinion.
Well, it's going some, isn't it? That really is going some.
The only leader who had any balls, it was Margaret Thatcher. She would have stood up and said no. She did. When she realised that the Single European Act, she was misled, and she finally stood up towards the end of her premiere and said no, no, no. And we need someone like Margaret Thatcher, love her all over, that has the balls and the clarity to turn around to the EU, said enough is enough, the people voted for Brexit, we will deliver what the people voted for. There shouldn't be a second referendum, in my opinion. The MPs, 80% of people who vote, 80% of the vote that went to parties who said we'd leave the single market in the customs.
I know. The levels of deception on this are appalling, Robert, and they are from the Labour Party too. Robert, I must move on. Now, I said earlier the government were trying to pull the summer recess to start this Thursday earlier. They've now tonight abandoned plans for the early summer holiday, and they've not tabled the motion in the Commons suggesting an early recess. I guess they thought it would look like bad PR. So the parliamentary agony will go on into next week as well, and then they will go on to their summer recess, which one of you earlier thought was a disgrace given the mess that the country's in. What does Joe in Nantwich make of Mrs May today?
Well, Nigel, I mean, we can go left, we can go right, but at the end of the day, we've got the Three Stooges across the channel there. our friends Juncker, Verhofstadt and Barnier, and whatever we do, they're going to knock back. They're not going to accept anything from us. But we made a step forward today, because what we did was we got, and you can tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong, but we got the fact that if we do crash out, we don't have to join anything, do we? We'd actually don't.
That's
it's a little
right.
step forward. We don't have to stay in the customs union. So it's a little victory for us today. And our friend Mrs. May, whilst, I was a Conservative, I'm still a Conservative member because I'm still living in hope for her. Maybe, speaking to my friend Donald, maybe she's going to get some cojones on her and say, look, enough is enough, because she's getting her ass kicked by our friend Rees-Mogg and a couple of others, because she did change her tune. And I think that I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was, because I think it was a little step. But you enlighten me in it, if I'm right or I'm wrong.
No, well, look, Joe, there is a possibility that she limps on, and the Brexit process limps on, and we do get over the line, and we leave that treaty on March 29th. I mean, that is still, perfectly possible, maybe even probable that will happen. The problem is, what we saw from the White Paper, we saw from the Chequers Accord, is that the kind of Brexit she's going to give us, Joe, frankly, is barely worth having. So that's, you paid your money, takes your choice. Thank you. Now, Donald Trump yesterday, of course, the big meeting, the big summit with Putin, and one of his manifesto pledges was, I want to get better relations with Russia, but it led to a huge wall of criticism, because basically people thought he was being nicer about Russia than he was about the FBI and the American intelligence agencies. So this afternoon, he's backtracked on his claim that he didn't see any reason why Russia would be involved in the US election meddling. This evening he said that what he meant to say was that he didn't see any reason why Russia wouldn't be responsible for meddling in the 2016 vote. And he said he has full faith and support for the US intelligence agencies and accepts their conclusion that Russian meddling took place. So that's quite a big change for Donald Trump. Unusual, really unusual for Trump to backtrack as much as that. Very interesting. Clearly, a lot of heat here in Washington, D.C. in particular. A lot of perhaps his own Republican members, on Capitol Hill, really worried about those comments, looking like he was against his own side and for the other side. He's backtracked. Quite significant. My last caller this evening on this subject is Peter in Cardiff, who's a new caller to this show. Welcome, Peter.
Oh, hi, Nigel. Thank you for that, and hope you're well. Just a couple of questions, Nigel. What do you see as the main advantage of a hard Brexit, a cliff edge, as some call it? The other question is, why would Brexiteers be afraid of giving us ordinary people another...
All right.
An agreement is reached. Sorry, Nigel. An agreement is reached, and then we vote on whether we want that or not. What's wrong with that?
Well, what's wrong with that is what happens if, when's the third referendum going to be? When's the fourth referendum going to be? I mean, a big constitutional referendum is something that can happen once every few decades. I wouldn't have thought another referendum was necessary for 20 or 30 years. Otherwise, we finish up in a never-endum. On your first point about the hard Brexit, Peter, I want to reiterate, there was no such thing as a hard Brexit and a soft Brexit in the campaign. All the main players on both sides told us very clearly that if we voted to leave, we were leaving the customs union, leaving the single market. What are the main advantages? Peter, for me, freedom, independence. We'll be in charge of our own destiny. All right?
Well, yes, I can understand the nationalistic opinion, but what about jobs, trade?
Yeah. Peter,
Europe has just done a wonderful...
For too long, Peter, for too long, the narrative of big businesses and the big multinationals has said this is good for jobs and business. 90% of our businesses have never traded in Europe and probably never, ever will. Love to continue that, but we're done. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show. I'm back tomorrow night at 7. At 10 o'clock this evening, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.